Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience, and welcome to the webinar entitled The Top 5 CTMS Enhancements You Can Make, which is presented by Perficient's Param Singh, who is the Director of Clinical Trial Management Solutions. My name is Eugene Stefanov. I'm the Marketing Manager for Perficient's Life Sciences practice. Before I turn it over to Param, I'd like to cover some basic housekeeping items and then provide a brief overview of our company. So all participants on this call will be in what we call listen-only mode. This means that everyone is on mute. You can submit questions to the speaker at any time today by typing them in the chat feature, which is located on the left side of your screen. Please make sure you state your questions clearly, and keep in mind other webinar participants will not see your questions or comments. Nonetheless, your questions will be anonymously addressed as time allows towards the end of the presentation. If you happen to have unanswered questions after the webinar or would like to request information about our services, you are welcome to send us a note by using the forms on the website. And you can also reference the contact information that's provided throughout the presentation. Please note that today's webinar is being recorded and will be sent to you within several days, along with a link to the actual slides. All right, now that I've covered the logistics, let's just move on to a quick overview of our company. Perficient is an IT consulting company that offers a whole host of IT solutions for a variety of industries, including, of course, life sciences, as well as healthcare, financial services, consumer products, and several others. We have employees and offices all over the world, including the locations on this map. And as you may expect, most of our clients are based in North America and Europe. This slide here contains a bunch of facts about our company. Just to point out a few, we were founded in 1997. We're a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ. And lastly, at the moment, we have a little over 2,500 employees. So we offer our clients many different types of business and technology solutions, from business process management and information management to content management systems, all the way to portals. We have a broad portfolio of solutions that we work with. The services we provide are what you would typically expect from an IT services company. So that's consulting, implementation and upgrades, cloud hosting, application support, project management, and the list goes on and on. But when it comes to life sciences specific IT applications, we cover the data management and ETC space, safety and pharmacovigilance, clinical trial management, data warehousing, as well as analytics. That said, we as a whole offer services that relate to many other areas inside a typical life sciences company. All right, now that I've covered the housekeeping items, I'd now like to turn the call over to Param Singh.
Thanks, Eugene. So let me start out by introducing myself. My name is Param Singh. I am the Director of the Clinical Trial Management Solution practice within Perficient's Life Sciences. I've been working in the industry since 1999, and almost exclusively during that time been working with clinical trial management solutions and particularly Siebel CTMS. During that time, I've been with Perficient Life Sciences for over 7 years now. And before that, I was part of Accenture's pharma R&D practice and leading Siebel CTMS implementations there as well and related systems. Now, overall, specifically the CTMS, I've been part of over 30 implementations of that solution now, Now these vary from implementations for pharmaceutical companies, CROs, AROs, medical device companies, and also range from anywhere from as little as 5 to 10 users of an implementation to over 4,000, 4,500 users for a global implementation. And over all these implementations, we've done quite a few sort of interesting enhancements that may translate well to other organizations. And for today, we've picked 5 of those enhancements to discuss and demonstrate. There are, of course, many other enhancements that we can focus on, that we have focused on. You may argue that these are not the top 5, but these are 5 that we've picked for today that are very interesting, I think, across the different organization types. With system integrations and automations and additional modules, obviously we've done quite a few other enhancements as well. So I'd just like to wrap up the introduction just talking a little bit about what the CTMS practice, what our team does, and explain a little bit more about some of the services that we offer. We provide a variety of services and products related to CTMS. We manage implementations of Siebel CTMS, whether those are custom implementations or our Siebel Clinical Accelerator Ascend. And also, if you've seen some of our previous webinars, we do extensive work with integrations in and out of Siebel, CTMS, and related systems. And in fact, we're sort of broadening our portfolio around some of the systems that we integrate to, and future webinars are actually going to be speaking to some of those that we're doing currently. Our approach to system implementation is very process-focused. So we also provide our process consulting services to really help organizations define and harmonize their SOPs and business processes across their organization with respect to clinical trial management. And we offer comprehensive training services and products related to CTMS and our Ascend solution. This is just a glimpse of some of the services and products that we offer in this space. And what I've highlighted is specifically for CTMS and Siebel, but we do offer process consulting across other applications as well, the related applications as well. So here's a look at today's agenda. It's pretty straightforward. So what we're going to do is actually go over each enhancement area separately. I'll go over some of the basics of each of the enhancement areas first, including the perceived value of each enhancement. And then we'll jump into the application and show you a live demo of that functionality that we've built. A small note on the demo, I'm going to have, I'll have multiple environments up to show you the overview of each of those enhancements, and some of those enhancements are in different Siebel environments, so they look a little bit different. So because there are different versions of Siebel, so the look and feel will be different in some of the demonstrations that we're doing, but the overall enhancements will work similarly across any version of Siebel that you may have or you may want to implement with no issue. So it translates nicely across Siebel versions, and we've used best practices when it comes to configuration for Siebel to accomplishing these enhancements. So the enhancements that we're going to be covering today will be, we'll start with investigational product tracking, and then we'll move on to electronic signatures for trip reports, protocol progress, or what we call the protocol summary module. We have a protocol expenses module that we'll look at, and finally site selection. And so then after we cover each of the enhancements and the demos, we'll have some time for questions. And keep in mind, if you have questions along the way, feel free to submit them in the chat feature located on your screen, and we'll address those questions during the final question and answer session. So with that, we'll get started. So the first enhancement that we're going to look at is investigational product tracking. And so before we look at the enhancement, what I wanted to do is look at the typical clinical supply management process when it comes to investigational product. So we start at the manufacturer, which produces the product, stores the product, and ultimately then manages the distribution to either depots or intermediate distributors or directly to the sites themselves. Next we have the depots or the intermediate distributors who will potentially store the product in regional locations until they're ready to be shipped to the site. And then sites then will receive the shipment, record the quantities, received, used, damaged, destroyed, expired, or returned, etc. And then in turn, they'll potentially send that product back to the sponsor, which the product that's either not used or it's damaged or expired will send it back to the sponsor for destruction. So we need a system that's capable of enabling and supporting this entire process. So there's several ways to accomplish a clinical supplies tracking capability in CTMS. From using vanilla out-of-the-box functionality, by using sort of activities views at the site level. You can do some simple enhancements to the application by just adding a few fields that are specific to the supplies tracking at the site level. You can do some moderate enhancements where you're adding additional views at the site level again to track clinical supplies and what you're shipping out to the site. And then more complex enhancements to support the whole process. And so what we're going to look at is going to be that more complex option, which of course will tend to be more expensive, more effort involved, of course, but will give a more comprehensive capability. So the setup is that we create new screens and views to track the following. So we're tracking, the manufacturer and the depots, if you have, sort of both of those layers. We're also going to be tracking product lots, when it comes to product administration, really looking at different lots for the product. And then we're going to manage inventory transactions that occur between depots, between the manufacturer and the depot, and then ultimately between the depot and the site. So we're going to actually be managing these transactions of product being sent from one location to another. And so what the system is going to do is then be able to track inventory levels at each depot and each site with all of those inventory transactions that are happening. So that's the setup of that of the more complex solution for product supplies tracking. So again, how it works, we're going to create the manufacturer and depot records. We're going to record outbound transactions under manufacturer and depots as they occur. So you'll see from a manufacturer, how many units are shipped to a particular depot, and then the inventory levels for each of those will be automatically calculated based on those transactions. And then you're tracking inventory information for depots and sites, such as dates, dates of receipt, dates that are sent, number of units received, number of units destroyed. So based on what you're entering for those transactions, it's calculating what you have on hand available at each of those locations. So the pros of this approach are that it will give you robust inventory tracking at the depot and site levels by lot number. You have increased inventory level visibility at the depot and the site level. Your optimal sort of querying and reporting capability around that, right? So you can sort of make decisions based on what is available at each of those locations, and you have sort of complete traceability. Some of the cons of this approach is that it does involve obviously more effort to implement, therefore more cost to do all of these sort of enhancements, more validation, testing, development, etc. And And this approach also is only good for investigational product. It's not really ideal for ancillary supplies. So ancillary supplies would still have to be managed and tracked in a different way. And so you have your investigational product tracking separate from your ancillary supplies that you're sending to the site. Another con of this approach is, at the site level, the usage of these kits and the usage of this product is not really typically tracked within CTMS. So, either potentially you need another integration, or you're manually tracking the levels, from a monitoring perspective. So that's one thing to keep in mind with this approach. So with that, we'll jump into the demo. And so for that, we just have to switch back and forth between the slides and the demo. Just bear with me. Okay. So for the product inventory tracking, we're going to start under the administration clinical area. So what we've done is add an enhancement to the product list. So if we look at our products, we're still tracking our products under product administration. And if we click on one of these products, we've added some additional fields, storage and handling requirements, and it's just additional attributes at that level. But with the product, we're also able to now track individual lots. So, lot number 1, 2, 3, 4, et cetera. You can have different expiration dates, manufacturer dates, what the unit descriptions are of those kits and lots related to that product. So once you have that sort of in place, the next piece is your inventory locations. So you have two different location types. One is a manufacturer location type, and one is an intermediate drug depot. The only difference between the two is when we're talking about inventory levels at the manufacturer level, we really don't necessarily care about the inventory levels at the manufacturer, because they're the ones that are creating the product inventory. So it's the depots that are actually receiving transactions, or receiving products from the manufacturer. So if we look at in one of these depots, if I click on that, what we see is the description of the depot, and then we have product lot total. So for each lot of that product, this is a mostly read-only view that's basically showing units received, units available, transferred, destroyed, based on the inventory transactions that we're creating for this particular product. So, for example, if I look at this first lot, if I go down, you'll see that the received from applet, or this section, is actually showing that we received 5,000 units from the manufacturer, and then we received another 500 units from another depot. So on hand, or we've received a total of 5,300, and the units available sort of automatically updates as well, based on anything that we've either transferred out to another depot or another location, or anything related to a site shipment. So here we have our 200 units that we've sent to the site, and so it automatically is calculating the units that are on hand available at this particular depot, right? So you can do depot to depot shipments and transactions. So if we look at depot number 2, again, if we're looking at lot number 1, you can see that they've received 2,000 units from the manufacturer. 100 were destroyed, and then we've also transferred out an additional 500. So again, it's capturing the units available based on all and any of those transactions. So that's at the sort of higher levels, outside of not taking into account the sites. So when we jump into the sites, if we look at one of these sites, we're able to determine who their IP distributor is. So that is the depot that is going to be fulfilling shipments to that particular site. And we've created a new module for product inventory shipments, and this is where they request additional shipments from the depot. So here you can see lot number 1, 2, and 3, how many units were requested, how many units were received, used, available, destroyed, units on hand is an automatic calculation, units available is an automatic calculation based on the values that are set at these individual levels. And again, everything that is being requested to and confirmed that it's been shipped to the site is actually being removed from the inventory that's either at the depot levels where this distribution is coming from. So if they're returned, if anything is returned, it automatically goes back to the inventory of where that inventory was returned. So that's just a glimpse of what these sort of robust enhancements can do from an investigational product supply tracking module. And again, just because of the timing, we don't really have time for an in-depth demo of each of these. But if anybody is interested in more of a in-depth demo across any of these modules, we can certainly set that up. So another major enhancement that organizations put into their CTMS is the electronic signature capability around trip reports. Particularly around trip reports, but you can certainly do it across other areas as well. Now, to see the value of this, let's discuss the paper process of the trip report and some of the challenges related to that. So the completion, when we talk about sort of the paper process, the completion of the trip report is not centralized, right? If you're doing it on paper, it's happening on an actual printed out checklist and trip report template, and they're sort of doing that on paper. If it's not occurring electronically in the central system, it's a disjointed process that can't be measured, it can't be standardized, or it's hard to have it standardized and definitely can't be measured. Submission of the trip report for review also occurs outside of the electronic system, therefore it can't be tracked or measured either. And with that, you might have multiple versions and iterations of the trip report, and they may get lost. You might be sharing and reviewing that over email. And so the reviews of those trip reports are also occurring outside of an electronic system. I mean, you might be doing it via email, but knowing where a trip report's review process is virtually impossible if you don't do it in a centralized system. And then even if you're doing some of the review and approval process in a system, sometimes even the final version of the trip report is routed manually for signature, right? Printed out from the system and then manually routed for a wet signature, and then the paper copy is scanned and then archived, right? So some of these, these are the challenges with the paper process of approving trip reports. And certainly this slows things down, if it's more of a manual process. So being able to centralize that and make it electronic is one capability that we look to systems like CTMS for. And so what we're going to look at in terms of the enhancement is the electronic signature, is the approval process, right? So when it comes to approvals, organizations really have different tolerance for what can be done in a system versus the traditional approach of signing and signing the document and then storing it. So more conservative organizations still opt for printing out the final report out of the system, doing the wet signature, and scanning and storing the document. So even organizations that have implemented Siebel CTMS still choose to go down this path of printing the document or printing the report out of the system and then processing it for final approval. Risk-tolerant organizations will opt for a 21 CFR Part 11 compliant system to enable and streamline the review and approval process in the system with a combination of potentially re-authenticating the user for anything that they're electronically signing, and then a visible audit trail that documents the the approvals against that electronic document. So we're just going to review the re-authentication and audit trail capabilities that can be built into the system to allow for this. So with that, we'll jump into the demo for that. So okay, let me share. Okay. So for the trip report piece, I'm just going to go into one of my sites and just go into a trip report. I won't go. I'll try to go a little quicker just so we have enough time for the other enhancements. So here I'm going to one of my sites. I'll go into site visits, and there's a trip report that hasn't been started yet. So site monitoring 6. Okay, so I'll just go through sort of basic actions here. I'm just going to mark it complete and just apply a template, and then we'll go through the approval process. Okay, select my template. Okay, so now my trip report is in progress. I can, sort of go through and do my checklist, do my questions. I'm not going to necessarily go through any of these items in detail, but basically, whatever your trip report looks like, you'll basically go through and build out your trip report. And so at the point where you're ready to submit it. All right, so we have our trip report built, and let's just say I answered all the questions. So one of the things that we've built around the trip report to enable this capability is, assigning the trip report obviously to multiple users. That's just a basic capability within CTMS. But what we've done is created, for the electronic signature and even notifications, you'll select the reviewer. And you can do this at multiple levels. We just made it as flexible as possible, where you're selecting, the reviewer per trip report of where this gets routed to. And so we've enabled electronic signature capability on the submission of a trip report and then the approval of the trip report. So if I were to, and we've created some error handling as well. So if you don't have a reviewer, it won't let you do that, or if you assign yourself as a reviewer, it won't let you do that either. So, some edit checks there, just from a user and permission standpoint, you can incorporate into the enhancement. But when you hit submit, are you sure you want to do this? Yes, and then you can have whatever type of warning or disclaimer, basically informing the user that they're about to submit this trip report, and it's the equivalent of physically signing the document, et cetera. So, and once you do that, the user is asked for their username and their password. And hopefully I know the password here. So, okay, yeah, so that's accurate. So the trip report automatically gets submitted. Your submitted dates get put against it, and also notifications will go out to the reviewer that you've selected that this trip report is ready to be reviewed, right? So now only reject and approve are enabled, but I can't reject or approve my own trip report. So we won't necessarily do that. But the notifications can be one of two things. It could be the universal inbox, where it can route those notifications directly to the user on their homepage, or it could be an email notification. So those are some of the enhancements that you can build with some of the Siebel functionality. So here, since we just submitted that one, it's actually going to a different user. But just to show you some of the notification capabilities, this is a trip report that got rejected by someone, and so, or my reviewer, so to rectify or resubmit that trip report, that's the notification I got that that it's been rejected, so I need to do something about it, and it will take me directly to the trip report to do what I need to do, right? So what also the system captures is all of the audit trail. So anytime that any status is changed through those buttons and through any sort of signature process or approval process or rejections, all of that is captured in an audit trail. So as many times as it's been rejected and then resubmitted, all of that is captured. So you have a full sort of audit trail of that whole review and approval process on the trip report. All right. Okay. So the next enhancement that we'll look at is a protocol summary or progress dashboard, which is related to metrics that you can get out of the system. So before we look at the enhancement, let's start by looking at some of the commonly requested metrics out of Siebel Clinical or CTMS in general. These are metrics that are most commonly requested by clinical project managers and research associates to better manage global trials by enabling them to capture and track clinical information at multiple levels of the clinical hierarchy. So users can track in real time a variety of information at protocol, region, site levels, country level, making it easy to conduct global trials. Essentially, project teams and managers need to gauge the project status and benchmark it against performance milestones, critical events, budgeted costs, to gauge the project of each study and overall, the efficiency of their organization across, a lot of various measures. This is particularly centered around various milestones and costs, and looking at comparisons between planned versus actuals, or even baseline and then current plans and forecasts and then actuals. Two informative measures are subject status and enrollment rates, and these are plotted for individual sites, for the region and the study as a whole. And then reports can be created by users with little or no involvement on the development side, depending on complexity and customization of the reporting requirement to really extract that data and derive certain metrics. So there are several key metrics that are available out of the box, or through some minor configuration where you can add some additional fields here and there. But what we're going to look at is really a more robust study metrics configuration that we've done for past clients that allow good visibility into some key metrics related to a study all in one area. So this was done just by doing some Siebel configuration and basic BI report development. And we're going to look at the demo as well, so I can explain this in a little bit more detail. But here are some of the basics of what we track. So for the study dashboard, we have high-level view of the progress of the study. So the protocol name, status phase, just high-level definition of it. Some of your planned versus actuals, again, subject forecasting. All right, so your planned subjects, and then your screened, enrolled, et cetera. Your site progress as well is something that is included. And then we have some key study milestones tracking. So we have, and this is different for each organization, but you basically try to define what your key milestones are, right? Maybe when the protocol is signed, first subject in, or first site initiation visit, first subject first visit, last subject last visit, et cetera, database lock. So there's a certain set of milestones that are important for each organization, and those are some of the ones that you can add into this type of enhancement. And then with each of those milestones, each of those standard milestones that you're looking at, you can actually create some study turnaround metrics. So how long did it take, or does it, should it take between approved protocol to first patient in? Enrollment time period, how long is your enrollment period? Or if there's turnaround times against other key milestones that are in your list. So now that we've created sort of these standard milestones, we can actually track how long you think it should take, right, as a organizational standard, and then how well your organization or this particular study is performing against those standards. So that's really what the protocol progress, enhancement and report really speak to is the organizations that have clinical development analytics and other tools like that, obviously have a clear advantage to getting some of these metrics out in a different way. But this is a way to do it all within Siebel to try to get some key reporting out on a study-by-study level. So let's look at that enhancement. And we have also a report that we could share. And these are all, sort of examples, right? So every organization will implement this in a slightly different way, right? Depending on what key performance indicators, what key metrics are important to them. But for the purposes of the demo, we'll just look at, what we've put into our system. And also some of the data might not be reflective of a typical study, but just to illustrate the point is what we're looking at from a demo perspective. All right, let's go back. I picked the wrong study. Okay, so here we have the protocol summary view that we've created, and in that we have some sub-views. So one view is related to milestones. And again, each organization will basically come up with their key list of milestones, what their key milestones are. For this study, what your baselines are for that study. If you've changed your plans against each of those milestones, you can change that. And then if you have achieved the actuals, you'll enter those as well. And some of these could be derived, right, from other milestones at the region and site levels and subject levels, but this is really the view to manage your baseline, your planned, and your actuals against each of these sort of critical milestones. And so what you also have is the ability to, like I said, your standard turnaround times against each of these pair of milestones, right? So you can put in a standard based on the type of study that you're doing, what your forecast says, how you're doing, and what your actuals say. So the number of weeks, I guess, between one milestone and another, and you can actually see how well you're doing as an organization against those particular cycle times. And then you can also have your plan to standards. So your forecast, between your forecast and your actuals, depending on sort of these turnaround times, it's basically saying how ahead or behind you are against each of those sort of critical milestones. So there's a series of sort of important metrics that you can get just to see how well you're doing on this particular study with regards to those particular milestones. One area in Siebel that we don't really have that we built this module against is projection. So having an area to look at our projected enrollment month to month for subjects, and also projected site activation. And this particular client also did some work around CRX, expected versus actual CRX. So to be able to do a month-to-month projection or quarter-by-quarter projection, it really doesn't matter. It's up to you. There's flexibility built into this type of enhancement. But you're able to do this across your study. And then we also added an additional area that you can enter in additional pieces. This is basically just to build the report that we built to add some additional attributes, sections to the report that's generated out of these this particular protocol summary area. So what the report looks like, again, if this is indicative of if all of the pieces of information are entered at that protocol summary view, this is what it would typically look like. And we have our study information here. We have all of our sort of milestones. We have our cycle time, our plan to standards. So each of the things that you saw within the application. We also have some enrollment statistics, some data standards around CRFs as well. And there's our additional attributes. So we have our study team and comments, any additional comments that you want to add. And then you can also put in some visuals around some of the graphs, related to some of the projections. So here's our site activation projection, across these 6 months. We also have our subject projections around these 6 months. So, this is just one example, again, of what that protocol summary report could look like. But really, this is something that you could use on a weekly or a monthly basis just to sort of communicate, study status. So that's really what this report and this module is really driving to is to get a clear idea of what metrics are important to our organization, and then standardizing that and standardizing the way that we report on metrics across studies. And that's a huge added benefit by sort of standardizing your critical list of milestones, your key performance indicators, the way that you do projections, things like that. So being able to standardize that also gives you the ability to standardize the metrics that you gauge, how well you're doing as an organization across studies. Okay. So let's see. The next enhancement is related to financials. So the system, out of the box, actually does a pretty good job in tracking the details around investigator payments and really investigator insight payments. It does and any visits and milestone payments. It does a really, really good job. But to get a real sort of full financial picture of what we as an organization are spending on a study, we need the ability to track other expenses. So the additional needs from a finance perspective are, the ability to budget amounts for specific types of expenses, the ability to track expenses as they are incurred, and the ability to track totals across those types, sort of expense types, as well as grand totals for all expenses separate from investigator payments. So we still obviously want to track our investigator payments, but that's not the whole picture. We really want to track, how much we're spending on contractor costs or vendor costs and other fees like travel and things like that. So that's really what the main focus of this enhancement is looking at. And so we'll just jump into the application and demonstrate what we've done there. Okay, so again, we have our site and investigator payments. That's working really, really well. What we are more focused on right now is to fill the gap around our internal costs and expenses. So what we've done is built, protocol expenses module, and this allows you to create any different types of expenses. So you can sort of create an infinite number of expense types or buckets of budget, whether it's contractor costs or vendors or travel costs, et cetera. So here's an example. We have, a contractor that we use or a company that we use, the Clin Experts. So our 2015 contractor budget is $100,000 for this particular study. And then we have our travel costs. Our Q2 2015 travel budget is $50,000. So when you start the study and you anticipate these expenses, you can enter them in at any time to really get the sort of budget understood, from an expense perspective. And then what you would do is, as you incur these expenses, you simply just add those invoices or add those expenses as you're incurring them, right? So here is an example. We have our January invoice of $15,750 and our February invoice of $18,515. And so just by entering that in, it's actually calculating our actual expenses against that particular bucket. And if we look at our travel, as we incur these expenses, if it's site-related travel, like here's our qualification visit for Site 101, that's our amount, and we can even relate it to the site. Or you can bundle it all up and say, okay, our February 2015 travel costs were $5,000. So it really gives you the flexibility to go to any level of granularity, either at the expense type level or even at the expense item level as you incur it. And it's calculating your actuals based on everything that you're entering that's an invoiceable, essentially. So you can see what you're doing, your actuals versus your budget against each of these types of expenses. And then at the highest level, you still have your earned to date and paid to date, which are related to your site and investigator payments. But now you have this budgeted expense amount around the expenses and your actuals at the totals level, grand total level of expenses. So between these four fields, you really get a full financial picture of how well you're doing, from a finance perspective for each study. And that's really our goal, to fill that gap, to address the expenses. And so we have one more enhancement area to go to, and then we'll open it up for questions. So the next enhancement is related to site selection. So we all know that an investigator database is an integral part of any CTMS. And with Siebel, there's many things that you can track for each contact or account. We have the main attributes like their specialty, their geographical address, their type of contact they are. And then we have additional information such as their past performance on studies, what studies they've worked on, their associations, affiliations, and other measures. And so for a valuable site selection within the system, we really need to have the ability to build a robust account and contact database with all of these multiple level attributes and searchable criteria to further define individuals and institutions, and then the ability to utilize all of those components of the definition of the account or contact, and search and have searchable criteria across that to generate a potential site list for that site selection process. So it's one thing to have all of these things that we can measure and track that the Siebel system gives us, out of the box. But if we can, if we can't effectively search across those measures, it really makes site selection a bit more tedious. So what we've done in the past and in our accelerator is create a whole site selection module that utilizes all these different areas of the investigator, the account and contact database to return a list of potential contacts or accounts that meet all of that complex criteria. So you can still search across basic attributes of the name and type of location, specialty, specialty for the contact, last name, etc. But then you have these additional searchable criteria like assessments, so contact and account assessments for their past performance, whether they've worked on previous protocols or not. And then this area of categories that we've utilized, which essentially gives you additional attributes, multi-level attributes that you can attach to the contact or the account. So let's look at that demo, and then we'll open it up for questions after this last demo. Okay. So, really quickly, obviously at the contacts level and the accounts level, we always have our full list of contacts that we can, we can search against. So any of this criteria, like the primary specialty, the country, the state, the type of, contact they are, we can, of course, always query and export and do all of that. But what we found is, some of the additional measures like that are sort of underneath all of this data or associated to these contacts is harder to search. So the site selection module, and we'll do it. We've created it both for accounts and for contacts, but let's look at contacts first. So I can always query for, let's say, primary specialty. So let's, cardiovascular disease. So I can still query on that, and it's going to, return a list that has all the contacts that meet that primary specialty. But let's say I want to go further than that, and I should have refined. So let's add criteria here and say we want to see anybody that we've assessed, done an assessment for that got a score of greater than 75%. So just by doing that, we sort of shorten that list. We can go further by adding some categories. So what we did for categories were things like experience. So let's say, demographics or experience. Let's say we need a contact that has a particular experience, and let's say implant surgery. So we need contacts that have implant surgery experience and that, have an assessment score greater than 75 and the cardiovascular disease specialty. So with that, again, it brings out only those contacts that meet each of these criteria. So when you're looking at site selection, you can obviously search on the basic attributes, but you can also go down to these measures, and it's extendable as well, right? So you can actually go to additional, add additional areas within the site selection piece to give you further things to search against. So one of the things, from an account perspective that we've added as a category is things like, equipment or assets that they may have at the facility. So these are the facility assets. So let's look at some of the values here. So if we look at just the facilities ones, you almost can do a pre-feasibility, right? So if you're building your site and investigator sort of database, if they have a centrifuge or digital imaging equipment, sub-zero refrigerator. So if there's particular pieces of equipment that are make or break for an upcoming study, if you sort of build that into your investigator database or your site database, you almost can do a pre-qualification just by doing this type of site selection query and only returning those accounts that have those pieces of equipment or those assets at their particular facility. So that's one way to extend the categories sort of feature as well on contacts and accounts, and then incorporate that into your site selection process. So with that, I will open it up for questions at this point. So again, you can enter in your questions in the chat feature, and then we'll try to address as many questions as we can with the remaining time that we have. But again, just in summary, these are sort of 5 of the enhancements that we've chosen for this webinar that we felt were interesting across different types of organizations that have sparked interest. And there's obviously many other enhancements that can be done with Siebel, that have been done with Siebel. And this was just a glimpse at sort of a high-level overview of some of those. And again, if you want some detailed demonstrations of the product supply piece or the progress summary or any of one of these enhancements, we can definitely schedule a more personal meeting to do that. But I hope it was valuable to see some of the capabilities that we can do with the system, through enhancements. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
So at the moment we don't have any questions. Nobody's submitted them yet, so we'll give it a few more seconds to see if anybody has anything.
Left everybody speechless, huh?
Definitely left me speechless. So, all right, well, it doesn't seem like there are any questions at the moment. But if you do come up with some, you're welcome to send us a note. You can reach Param directly, or you can email our life sciences info at Perficient email address, or you can call us. Within the next several days, we will get the recording to you guys, as well as the link for the slides that you guys can review and share with your colleagues. We have a couple of more webinars that are scheduled. You may or may not know. Off the top of my head, it looks like we have one that's coming up about HIPAA and how it relates to pharmacovigilance. There will be a webinar in April also on 21 CFR Part 11, and we're going to go ahead and break that down for everybody. And we'll also have a CTMS webinar that's going to be scheduled shortly that will discuss the various implementation approaches. So stay tuned for all of those webinars. And thank you so much for attending this, and we look forward to having you join future presentations. Thanks so much, and thank you, Param.
Thank you, everyone.